don't go any further right. Hello everyone. I appreciate people are still going to be finishing their croissants and whatever they are enjoying over during the break. But for those joining us live, online, on YouTube, and also who will be coming in the audience when I go and give a second rallying call, we're really excited to get started with our next session of the day. I'm going to introduce David Wood, who's the chair of London Futurists, talking all about the future of smart cities and the fourth industrial revolution. But I'll hand the reins straight over to you, David, to give a more comprehensive breakdown of what that means. Thank you very much for joining. If you've got any questions, please do pop them into the chat or raise your hand if you're here live, and we'll make sure we get our questions over to David before the end of the session. Thanks very much for joining. Over to you, then.
30 minutes altogether?
Yep.
So welcome everybody. My name's David Wood. I chair London Futurists. I'm joined today by 4 little helpers, N, B, I, C, which might look cute, but might also be terrifying. Some of you may recognize these as 4 quadrants of the fourth industrial revolution. That is my theme, how the fourth industrial revolution is the right framing for what we're seeing today, and why the fourth industrial revolution has the potential to change everything, including the cities in which we live. I'll be talking about the potential, but also the peril of the technologies and their impacts. I'll summarize in just one sentence the potential and the peril. It's all driven by technology. Technology has the biggest impact. But whether the technology leads to a wonderful future for cities and society, or whether it leads to a terrible future for cities and society, depends not just on technology, it depends critically on us humans, with our human actions. And even more, it depends on something which sounds a bit quaint, but which is very important, which is our collective wisdom. That might sound a bit hippie-esque, but I'll flesh that out later on. Despite everything that's happened in the last few years, London is still one of the great cities of the world. But my goodness, there are problems facing us, and these problems could get a lot worse more quickly than people expect. We already have issues of homelessness, shortage of affordable accommodation, transport sometimes works, but there's lots of chaos. We have a decaying infrastructure, erosion in our buildings, erosion in some of our recreation grounds. And what's left? Some people feel that less of a home and more of a house. It's a hollow feeling. Some people are leaving cities as a result, and that's a trend that could accelerate. Those that remain no longer feel part of a great community. They feel more fragmented and alienated, and that can lead to all sorts of crime. Knife crime, financial crime. And that sounds bad, but it could actually get a whole lot worse if we mismanage our friends NBIC. I chair London Futurists. Over the last 15 years, I've hosted more than 300 public discussions about the future of technology. But I'm not going to look straight away at the future of London. I want to look at the past of London. What's the point of looking at the past? Well, I think sometimes the best foresight comes from the best hindsight. London has some remarkable statistics. We have, quite close to here, in the Bank of England's economic statistics, going back 7.5 centuries. What I'm showing you here from our world in data is a summary of these figures, showing how the average economic contribution of people in England has changed over these 7.5 centuries. I wonder if you know what this curve looks like. Is it sinusoidal? Is it a straight line? Well, let me fill it in. But if you look at that, you might notice a bit of a glitch here in the First World War, a bit of a slowdown temporarily in the economy from the Second World War, and a bit of a glitch also more recently with the 2008 crash. But by far the biggest picture, if you look at it macroscopically, is this: an acceleration in economic contribution, increasing from the mid 1800s. That's a measure of wealth. What about the measure of health? Let's look at lifespan. That's one measure of health. There isn't quite such a long set of data in this case. It's not 7.5 centuries, but nearly 500 years. Again, I ask you to contemplate in advance what this curve might look like. Let you fill it in. You might notice something strange going on in 1918. If I'd given this talk 10 years ago, nobody would have known what that is, but it is. Now we know the impact of a terrible flu pandemic, made worse by the fact that society had been weakened due to the stresses of World War I. Further back in history, there were even worse drops. 1728, terrible famines brought on by a disease that had devastated many agricultural workers. And the worst year in history of these 500 years, not something you read about in history books so often, but it was 1557. Terrible flu pandemic spread the world. The next year, the Queen died, Archbishop of Canterbury died, her doctors died. But for a long time, it was terrible. But that's not the main picture. And the interesting thing about these is that things go wrong when more than one thing goes wrong at the same time. That's really the biggest risks and also the biggest opportunities. But again, the big picture is worth paying attention to. Little net change in average life expectancy throughout most of that period, an acceleration from 1860 to around 1960, and a slowdown, but still an improvement from the 1960s to the present. Just one more graph. Average years of schooling, a measure of education, what we think this looks like. We don't have the same length here, but again, the measure is up and up. Let me summarize in the words of the MIT economist Andrew McAfee. Says many of these economic statistics, many statistics about human life hardly changed until the middle of the 18th century. But then, starting with the Industrial Revolution, centered around James Watt's improvements to the steam engine, humanity's trajectory, measured by many different ways, has bent sharply, and he says, maybe optimistically, permanently upwards. To summarize, history teaches us that nothing changes the world like technology, and that although we like to read stories of great wars and empires, despots and democrats, actually they didn't change the world so much as few practical inventions. And I think that's true at a certain level. I'm not going to be completely ridiculous and summarize all of human history on a single chart, but just 4 dates pulled out. And this is the theory that the biggest driver in history is technological change. And we already heard Andrew McAfee pointing to the start of the first industrial revolution, the use of steam in increasing numbers of industry, leading to mechanization of many processes, leading later to the revolutions in transport. It might change the world. Historians also look at the second industrial revolution starting off from about the 1880s. The key features of this were electricity gradually displaced steam, synthetic chemicals, including oil, and things we did with oil changed the world. Steel, new buildings higher than ever before, mass production, then we thought automation. And then there's a third industrial revolution that historians talk about, starting from around about 1960, the start of the integrated circuit, the first ever integrated circuit in 1959, the first computer languages, Fortran and Algol and COBOL in the late 1950s, 1960s, computers started displacing people from the workforce. This is the tale of computers, electronics, cellular communications. And the fourth, here's where my friends in the IC showed the beginning come in. And you see the lines, the boxes are getting larger. The contributions to the first industrial revolution was mainly in Europe. The second industrial revolution was driven also by inventions in Americas. The third involved inventions as well from Asia and Australasia. The fourth was truly a worldwide phenomenon. None of this happens by itself, by the way. The progress of technology and its associated impact on human life depends critically on scientific methods, people able to think rationally, and openness in society is vital. People should be able to query existing authorities, question what was perceived wisdom, and very importantly, should be able to associate in ways that couldn't be done before. That's one of the drivers for this change. Another driver for these industrial revolutions, what they all had in common was a core invention that turned out to be not just a specific technology, but a general technology, which delivered much more than had originally been expected. Once upon a time, the head of IBM thought that there might be 5 major computers in use around the world. Now they're used everywhere. Also, what drives these industrial revolutions and their bigger and bigger impact on the world is feedback cycles. The first technologies are created by rather crude tools, but with better technologies, we can build better tools, which can build better technologies. We can use computers to design better computers. We can use software to help write better software. Also, the technology makes people smarter, augments their capabilities, which allows the people to be more productive, and it makes society, in principle, more productive with the technological things like networks and online YouTube videos. So that's what drives the acceleration. It's an acceleration not just within each industrial revolution, it's an overall acceleration. And you might notice there is a shortening of the time periods between each successive wave. 120 years between the start of the first 2 waves, about 2/3 of that to the start of the 3rd Industrial Revolution, about 2/3 again of that to the start of the 4th Industrial Revolution, which I still haven't told you much about, and that's coming next. But just for a moment, let's be bold, let's extrapolate. If this trend of increasing acceleration continues, we might have what? In around 2/3 of 50, 35 years, we might have a 5th industrial revolution, even larger scope. The futurists do talk about this. Futurists give this the name the singularity or the technological singularity, when we have artificial general intelligence leading to superintelligence. I'd love to talk about that. That's not, however, my subject today, for a couple of reasons. First, I think it's likely we'll get there sooner than 2045 with the pace of improvement in AI. But secondly, it's not clear that we will get there, because whether we get there or not depends critically on how well we manage the stresses and strains of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Because as you will have been thinking as I've gone through this, you'll have said, yeah, David, you're talking about all the good things that happened, the improvements in lifespan, the improvements in wealth, the improvements in education, but many bad things have happened from each industrial revolution as well. Yes, there have been opportunities with health, education, housing, goods, and well-being, but there have been risks. We are damaging the environment. We are damaging our social structures. We are enabling new forms of crime. Each new set of technology allows people to rob, or to deceive, or manipulate in new ways. Each new wave of technology opens up new possibilities for new types of warfare. And the worst thing that's happening, if we fail to manage these technologies wisely, is social chaos. And look at the very bottom of the graph, the scientific method and the openness in society upon which all this innovation depends is now under threat as never before. We have people deciding scientific questions based on political influence. It's almost back in the days of the Soviet Union when you had to believe in Lysenkoism, the Lamarckian theory, because it fitted with Marxism. Today, do you believe in a particular treatment for COVID? Well, it depends on whether you're a supporter or not of Donald Trump. You know, we don't have science anymore, we've got lots of pseudoscience. And in terms of openness, we have too many politicians and too many countries saying, "Je suis l'État, I am the state," and we no longer have openness in democracy. So that's at risk. All right, time to dip into this NBIC convergence. Earlier I had 4 robots on the screen. Well, they represent 4 separate technological revolutions. I stands for infotech. It is something we understand well. It is deep learning based on big data. It's drawing insight from data as never before. It's not just software written by humans, it's software written by software or software written by AI. N is for nanotech. It's manipulating Matter, programmably, systematically, on the nanoscale. B is for manipulating and reprogramming our genes and other aspects of our biology. It's CRISPR technologies, it's the thing that Jeff Bezos and many others are investing billions in to reprogram our epigenetics with Altos Labs to make us live longer. Then we have C, cognitech. Of the four, this is the least developed so far, but it is the one with perhaps the biggest impact, because we can reprogram and improve our neurons, make our brains more effective. I draw this as four quadrants. The top is roughly hardware, the bottom is roughly software, the left is roughly physics, the right is roughly biology. But it's more important to see the connections between them. I did say earlier the most important things often happen when you have two or three more things coinciding. It's the convergence of feedback cycles that gives us the biggest potential. So some examples. Nanotech allows us to have better, not just better computers, but better sensors of all sorts. We can sense what's happening inside people's brains more easily without having to cut their skull open. And as we scan and see what's going on inside human brains when they're being intuitive or meditating, being creative, we can to some extent copy some of these features back into our AI. And with better AI, we can design better drugs. And so on it goes. One other quick example, nanotech allows us to build better chips. Not just the CPUs, which Moore's law originally spoke about from 1959 onwards, but new types of chips, GPUs, which have fueled the growth of neural networks. Now we have TPUs, enhancements to chips that are even better suited for AI, and not yet, but soon, perhaps we'll have quantum processing units. So all of this allows better AI. But here's the kicker, the better AI allows us to design better chips. Remarkably, it's no longer just humans. So there's another positive feedback cycle there. Which is why, I say again, we're likely to see an acceleration of the progress more than we've seen before. And it's no longer just a curiosity, a science experiment. The biggest technology in the world by far, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 technologies, are all AI, aspects of AI. Because so much money is tied up with improvements. The companies who can develop and apply these technologies first, potentially will not just be the first $1 trillion company in the world, but before long we see the first company with a $10 billion valuation. So if you're into financial trading, you want better AI to help you. If you're writing games, we heard a lot earlier today about the importance of the games industry. If the games industry has great virtual characters with AI, that makes them more successful. Customer support agents, improved interaction design for improved software, faster healthcare, research and development, that's absolutely critical. The more AI can be used to short circuit the delays in the drug discovery and validation process, that's enormously important for social expenditure and health welfare. Art, science, engineering, all of them stand to be accelerated by even more AI. And there are bad guys too, who want to get their hands on more AI, cleverer AI, so they can steal more of our money more effectively. And there are good guys who are trying to be intelligent and spot the malware, even though the malware is quite hidden these days. There's an arms race there, driving further enhancements and innovations. And there's an arms race on arms with people trying to put better AI into offensive and defensive weapon systems. Again, positive feedback cycles, which is why we are likely to see faster progress in the next 3 to 5 years than we've ever seen before. So what does this mean? I'm now going to do my second completely ludicrous, oversimplified view of all of human history. For those of you who missed the beginning, I basically went through some statistics that says, on the whole, we have flourished more, especially in the last 200 years. We have lived longer, we have more opportunities on the whole, although yes, there are risks of damage too. But if we look ahead, perhaps 15 years, 14 years, 15 years, you might look at here, most people sort of naively think, well, it's going to be more or less the same, you know, we might be a little bit faster, we might be a little bit more exotic in our experiences with AI. Perhaps things will speed up a bit, perhaps slow down, kind of the pessimist and the optimist. I think none of these forecasts are very likely. I say it's only about a 10% chance we're still living in a business as usual world by 2038? It's because these technologies are going to change even more than what's happened in the past. And we could, if we're not careful, spin into a collapse. An environmental catastrophe, a social collapse with decline of democracy, decline of openness, powerful people seizing control of the infrastructure and then making a terrible mess out of it. That is far too likely a scenario in my view. Now, if you're good at maths, you can probably work out there's a 60% chance of something else happening. And I am more of an optimist than a pessimist, I think. There's a 60% chance we're going to pull through together with our collective wisdom that I spoke about at the beginning. And that can reach us to what I call a sustainable abundance for all. But the fact that there's still a high probability of a collapse should worry all of us. And it's my entire mission, in all that I do, to lower the probability of this collapse scenario and raise the probability of this abundance scenario. And there are two things we have to do to make that true. We have to make this positive vision clearer, more credible, flesh it out. It's not just well, it's better than well. Sometimes called the humanity plus future. But at the same time, we've got to not be naive, we've got to understand what could go wrong here. What are the forces that are causing this decay and outrage? And there's a lot. I don't have time today, but if I had more time, I would talk about 11 landmines en route to a better future. And if we are careless, if we are distracted, we might step on any one of these 11 landmines and end up plummeting towards that collapse scenario. And you can guess what some of them are. I'm just going to look at one of them. Number one on the list, the left behinds. Here I'm illustrating an individual who feels left behind by what's going on. He feels confused, he feels cheated, he feels outraged, but it's also individual groups. It's also whole nations that are feeling left behind and it's driving them to stupid and crazy decisions. So, it is people who observe that they're not getting as much as they expected of the benefits, which apparently other members of the global society are receiving. It used to be the case that every generation would see children earning more than their parents, and children were proud about that. Yes, I've done something good, my children are doing better, but now it's no longer the case. And there's less mobility. The statistics for whether people who are born poor can end up rich, that's declining around the world. And people feel a declining social validation. The Venezuelan writer Moises Naim, like a lot, talks about status dissonance. People feel that the world should respect them a lot more than actually seems to be the case. It's driving many people to despair, driving decline in life expectancy, contrary to some of the statistics I showed earlier. Suicides, alcoholism, drug addiction, lack of purpose, driving people downwards. It's leading to, in many ways, a miserable society with a heavily guarded, sharply divided psychic trauma. And it's bad for all of these people. And it's particularly bad that a small proportion of these left behinds want to go out with a bang. Seek revenge, notoriety, or validation. And if they get their hands on some of these other left behinds, if they get their hands on weapons of mass destruction, if they become a political leader, and get control of the arsenal of the Kremlin or whatever, it's really scary. But rather than dwelling just on the risks, we must also look at the positive vision. Try to spell this out a little bit more. Taking charge of the technologies of NBIC, encouraging the market where appropriate to hurry up, but also directing the policies of governments so that we have this sustainable abundance for all. Abundance of clean energy by taking advantage of today and tomorrow's green tech. An abundance of healthy food by transforming the way we are growing food with synthetic biotech. An abundance of material goods and shelter, using nanotech so they are robust but also low cost. Affordable health via rejuvenation biotechnology, all-round intelligence, lots of time for creativity, lots of time to explore, which is the kind of things that makes us truly human. And all of this is driven by getting the collaboration right, getting democracy right, so that everybody benefits. And I do make the claim that all of this could happen within the next 15 years. Why? Because all of them are boosted by AI. every one of these technologies can go a lot faster once we get AI. Like Google's DeepMind in this city, their AlphaFold revolutionized the understanding of how proteins fold in 3 dimensions. But none of this is taken for granted. For each thing I said could go well, equally we could go badly and end up in an H- future by mismanaging these technologies. Instead of an abundance of clean energy, we could have a preponderance of polluting energy, malnutrition, waste and biohazard, chronic disease, unwise cleverness, soul-destroying toil, overcrowding, inequality and tribalism. All of that is within our grasp too, if we are distracted, if we're not paying attention, if we are careless. Just compare these again. That's what might happen, and this also might happen. The biggest difference, my last few remarks, the biggest difference I think is right at the bottom there, what I'm calling social technology. What the heck is social technology, you might be asking? Where does it fit on this nice picture of NBIC? Is it something to do with atoms? Is it something to do with genes or bits or neurons? It's the missing picture. It's right in the center. Social technology is what do we understand about the things that matter most, and what are we doing to ensure that the things that matter most really are upheld? If I had more time, I would open the kimono, I would look at each of these boxes and explore the remarkable ways in which the world will be changing in the next 15 years. I would look at something that people call the planetary technology as well, taking advantage of overlaps. But whether each of these leads to abundance or leads to collapse and despair depends, as I said, on this social tech. And we should look a little bit inside that box before I wind up. It's to do with how do people have a fair access to finance, a fair access to computing power, a fair access to data, all of which is important about realizing whatever innovative visions they may have. How do we do that in ways that preserves privacy and security? How do we energize the markets to do what they can do very well without seeing the failures of market? In other words, what are the right regulations? And I was in this session earlier this morning in stage 1, where there was a start of the discussion about how can we get the regulations right. That should have had much more attention. That was a truly important thing. Even more important than any of these are what are we educating people about? What are people spending their time learning? And how do we structure it all together with politics? It's the politics that might make the biggest difference. If we get our politics wrong, all the other things that we might aspire to do will be overtaken by chaos and destruction. If I had more time, you might read about this in some of my books, I would talk about the importance of democracy. It's government of the people, by the people, for all the people. That's a great vision. It is the right vision, but it depends upon people. And as you may have heard, a quote put into the mouth of Winston Churchill sometimes, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Winston Churchill's estate denies that he ever says that. Whether or not he did is unclear. But for this to work, we must ensure that the people who are involved are educated. They have some degree of autonomy. They're not just manipulated by the cruder forces around them. They have some ability to think critically, grasp history, foresight, and they are supported. Is that sufficient? I don't think so. We need to do a bit more. So I talk about super democracy. I talk about government of the people, by the people, aided by technology and by institutions. We must use technology and institutions so that we have a better democracy for the people. So some of this is fairly obvious: real-time fact-checking, logic-checking, source-checking, using AI to propose new solutions, simulations. We might get a bit better people as a result. That is some encouragement. But actually, the most important thing I've left at the end, it is these 2 vital inventions, 2 institutions. And you may not like what I say here. You might be expecting me to say the vital invention is going to make all the difference is Web3. Sorry, I'm not saying that. It is actually old inventions. It's the mixed economy and separation of powers. 2 of the most important things humanity has done in the last few centuries. And they're almost getting lost in the turmoil. So we've got to bring them back. You can call them decentralizations. I don't have time to explain them, but this is where we must put our focus. You can read more about that in some of the books I've written. The most important book I've written a couple of years ago is how all these things tie together with a vision, which I call the transhumanist vision. The most urgent book I've written last year is why things are going even faster than I previously thought. These singularity principles, we must anticipate and manage cataclysmically disruptive technologies. If we are foolish, we will end up in a bad place. If we are collectively wise, we will have a wonderful future. Thank you very much.
I think we have time for one or two questions. There's a lot to unpack there, so if anyone's got a question, please, here you go.
So, hopefully this is too left field, but one of the things I've been noticing more and more as I age is that the tech industry is a very youth-centered and youth culture-centered industry, and that there is a lot of ageism, and I want to say it's increasing, but it may simply be that as I get older, I notice that ageism more. Do you see that that ageism and that youth-centered nature to tech as any type of driving force,
yes,
positive or negative, in what we are actually doing?
One of my other landmines is about divided aging. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get back to that slide, but there is a whole set of issues with the aging society. We are not handling the aging society well. Gosh, it's further back than I remember. Let's cheat here. No, it's true. Many companies are not taking sufficient advantage of the wisdom of older people. And they are driven by very clever youngsters. My goodness, in order to cope with this, we need more than the rah-rah-rah enthusiasm of youth. You know, it's great that young people don't know what's impossible, and they often go and do it, and we say, wow, we didn't know it was possible. But there are some very big issues, and we must get, therefore, the solution to this divided aging, which I write about a lot. I've written whole books on how to have a rejuvenation, not just of body, but a rejuvenation of mind. So we get the older, wiser people of society. By the way, not every old person is wise by any means. There are many wise youngsters as well. But how do we tap into that general wisdom? Because we're not going to get into a better future unless we pull together all the best of the insights from multiple cultures. Not to accept them uncritically, we've got to hear them and then collectively evaluate them. The second last episode of the London Futurist podcast was all on this topic, with Andrew Scott, who is a professor at the London Business School. So look out the London Futurist podcast, it's just 30-minute episodes each, and we unpack that very important question. Not left field at all.
Thank you very much. I had one question. You talked quite polarizingly about our up and our down trajectories. Do you see that they will be that polarized, or do you envision perhaps some things going in a positive direction, others in a more negative direction, and we might see and we might then land somewhere in the middle, or something? And then we've got some little addition to that question.
So we are having both at the same time. Right. We are living in the best time ever, and possibly in some ways we're living in the worst time ever. You know, you can easily find things.
So you can say it's the best of times and the worst of times?
That's right, exactly Charles Dickens, you know. The tale of two cities.
Yeah.
So we are seeing remarkably wonderful things, but there's potential for damage is there. And they're not going to balance each. One of them's going to tip over. Yeah. You know, if something called Moore's Law of Mad Science, and coined by Eliezer Yudkowsky in 2005, a younger version of Eliezer Yudkowsky who's been on the TV recently a lot. 2005, he just whimsically said, every 18 months, according to Gordon Moore, computer power gets twice as much for the same cost. That's the number of transistors that can be put on an integrated circuit. Eliezer Yudkowsky whimsically, semi-whimsically said every year, every 18 months, the IQ necessary for a mad scientist to destroy the world comes down by a few IQ points. So today, if you get somebody really upset, one of these left behind, just say, I'm going to show this fucking world, I'm going to smash my airplane into the Swiss Alps, I'm going to do something. They can kill a lot of people today, they can't destroy the whole world. But in not too long a time in the future, one of them is going to get a hold of the technology to build the worst ever virus, worse than COVID, or some other thing. Or these North Korean hackers, had ransomware that got out of the control. The Lazarus group of North Korea, they tried to earn lots of money and they ended up damaging lots of infrastructure even they didn't intend. So sooner or later, it's either going to tip into this much better world or a much worse world. That's why I say there's only a 10% chance we'll be here in 2038 discussing Web 7 and saying, well, maybe this, maybe that. We'll either be in this wonderful world or we won't be here at all.
Can I just add to that question briefly? So there's obviously a balance. Some things will progress forward and some things may regress. You have the slide with both alternatives, positive and negative. This is a bit polarizing, but if you had to choose half and half from the positive direction and the negative direction, which ones would you choose?
No, I think we need to do them all. If we leave bits behind, we will end up in a very bad place. So I think you're referring to these two here. If we have these things that are on this slide, the polluting energy, it will tip over the atmosphere into this terrible state of climate change. And we might be enjoying the best experiences ever, and then there's the worst weather ever. And what we'll do is cause all the other things to go worse as well. We'll have climate refugees. If you think we've got problems with immigration and refugees today, it'll be 10 times worse when some of that happens. And it will mess up the agricultural supply chains as well. Ukraine now is not giving its contributions to the world's agricultural system. It'll be much worse. So if this goes wrong, if almost any of these goes wrong, it tips. Some of them are more catastrophic than others. So I think we need to get them all right, which is hard. But hey, there's 8 billion people. So let's get 8 billion people working on different aspects of these problems with a common vision.
Would you say that in order to make sure that people can work together and we avoid the bad managed, unless we change the economic model that we are basing our society in, we are doomed to go in that direction?
So my solution is the mixed economy. I think the mixed economy, which sounds glib, it's to let many aspects of innovation run free. We don't determine in advance which version of the blockchain is the right one. We don't determine in advance what's the right way to design the semiconductor. We let the market find out. But we need to monitor it from on high. We need to be aware of market failures. You know, we're not educating enough people about market failures. That's part of the missing knowledge. So we must get that mixed economy to work, which involves some industrial strategy. We must not succumb to either of the fundamentalisms there, the pro-market fundamentalists and everything can be solved by free market forces, or the anti-market fundamentalists who say we've got to put everything under the control of the all-wise Soviet central planning. Neither of these is going to work. Sorry, these are big questions.
It's a big conference. So, given that we need all of that, as I would completely agree, which of those do you think, though, is kind of the cornerstone or the keystone? Yeah, okay, that's exactly what I was thinking. That's all I wanted to hear.
That was on the next slide, wasn't it? I said this.
Oh, okay.
It sits in the middle, right?
But I was speaking far too fast, so it's understandable if you're only picking 5% of what I say. Just so I show you the books at the end. Right, I think we're out of time. We started very late, but thanks to everybody watching online, and thanks to everybody watching the recording. Check out my Twitter feed, W2, check out the London Futurist podcast, or you'll find my books online too at thedeltawisdom.com.
Thank you very much, David. Round of applause. A really wonderful, pragmatic and realistic talk, I think. Not positive or negative, but actually just giving us a balance, which is highly appreciative. We often sort of smear these things with positivity, and it's important to understand the balanced arguments. So, yeah, thank you very much, David. We've now got a panel forming. We're going to be talking all about AI and the metaverse, and looking at creating intelligent and responsive virtual environments. So if you give us like 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to set up some chairs, and then we'll get started straight into it, and I'll introduce our moderator and panelists. Thank you very much.
Well, I think it's
yes, exactly. Education starts.
Not a twilight zone society. So I came up with a magic bullet whereby I instantly all It's similar companies, similar countries, taking a lot of those, and everybody is not minimal, but you can still do much. Your body is constantly rejuvenating, and only ever ages to 34. So everybody's 34. No one, if you fall out now, you're dead. But disease is pretty much going down. It is a dozen. I do this, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. But the story is actually about the last human who was born before this new human race was about.
If I could ask a moderator to come up to the stage, that would be the first person to mic.
Sorry? I'm a fan of PowerPoint. Yes, Bill? My mother
Oh, okay. So I call that anger. Right. Yeah. And that's what
Hello everyone. I'm maybe a little bit louder. Thanks for your patience while I got that set up. I'm really excited to introduce this next panel. It's looking at two kind of well talked about trends, AI and the metaverse, and understanding how do these two come together, and what does it mean to create intelligent and responsive virtual environments. So I'm going to introduce Stefania Barbaglio.
Fantastic.
Perfect. Who's going to be moderating, and I'll allow her to introduce our panelists. And meanwhile, I'll spare your eyes by turning off the projector.
Miles, thank you so much, and it's great to see you all here today. So I'm Steffi. I'm the founder of Circus Services, also the creator of the Financial Fox podcast, and I'm an investor in Web3 as well. So this is going to be a very exciting panel because we are going to be talking about AI, the metaverse, and how actually we are creating those more engaging and personalized experience in the metaverse, and also how does it look like this new customized, intelligent, virtual environment. I mean, AI is a massive buzzword right now, but there are a lot of controversy as well around AI. So rather than me introducing my amazing panelists, I think it would be better for you, each of you, to introduce yourself and what you are working on.
So I'm Haya, and I don't know if this is working, but I'm a program manager at Outlier Ventures. Outlier Ventures is the largest Web3 accelerator, and in my job as program manager, half of the time I'm looking for really exciting Web3 startups to invest in, and on the other half of the time I'm helping them build and scale commercially viable business models.
Yeah.
My name is Jimmy Dowdu. I'm the founder and CEO of VaultGo. And Voltaire is the company behind the world's first human-centric metaverse. And we've recently pivoted to AI and looking at how we use AI from a non-player character perspective to transform the wellness space and some other use cases that add value. We'll talk about that in detail shortly.
Hi everyone, my name is Martin Krupik. I'm the founder of Immersa. Stands to emerge. We want you to immerse and then emerge victorious. So it's all about empowering people, utilizing gaming environments and accelerating digital transformation, I guess. Likewise, as an AI-driven metaverse, we're aiming to help people navigate through the increasingly difficult digital landscape.
I love that, immersing and immersing. Right, so let's just go straight into it. Let's talk about some use case of AI in the metaverse.
Yeah, happy to start first. I caught Mr. Boyd's the end of his presentation about an hour ago on stage one, where he was talking about the virtual AI assistant. And again, that is a use case that, trust me, once you start to manifest that, it's going to save a whole lot of time. Controversially speaking, that will relieve some folks from jobs. But again, it's how we now use that concept of the virtual assistants to create and use that to upskill people as well, i.e. using AI for your job rather than using AI to substitute yourself. A second example, and one of the use cases we're working at Voltaire is using AI non-player characters for wellness. So one of the personas in the Vitality District in our metaverse is called Dr. Emily. Now, Dr. Emily can come to you and talk to you about mental health, depression, anxiety. And then we connect Dr. Emily through an avatar to the real Dr. Emily. Now, what that does is ownership, transparency, data privacy, and all of that good stuff. But what we now want to do is flip it over the head and then provide that access of Dr. Emily, which is a freemium version in the first instance, to folks in Africa, Lagos, Nigeria, that wouldn't have the benefit or the experience of having those consultations from a wellness perspective. I mean, we're looking at therapy in the UK, from anywhere from £60 an hour, to talk to a therapist. How do we start reducing that and providing access with that using artificial intelligence?
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I think why the combination of AI and the blockchain technology specifically, I think they're very complementary in many ways. Because AI is this very dynamic thing, it's fast moving and it's always evolving, and then the blockchain helps it kind of make it, more kind of careful thought out. So when we talk about use cases like healthcare, then I think about the zero knowledge proof technology and being able to selectively share data, as opposed to, AI today without Web3 is just all of your data, everything, everyone sees everything, and you're getting kind of screwed over by it. But Web3 is a way to where we can benefit from this data without also screwing ourselves over from it. And I think another kind of thing that can emerge, I think, from the combination of both is the ability to have again, due to kind of being able to create individual digital identities with Web3, that means that when you're creating and building AI agents, for example, you can start having very personalized AI agents, which is another thing that comes from combining both of these worlds. The other thing is, I think that is the question mark of, and I'm sure actually Martin could probably add a lot more to that, but what AI unlocks in terms of the metaverse itself, because there are different barriers for developers building in the metaverse. Creation of 3D content is super hard. We talk a lot about interoperability and interoperability across chains, but even that is not easy technically. And suddenly with AI, all of these things are a lot easier. You're unlocking crazy ability to generate so much user-generated content. And I think that's another
I think you brought up a great point about transparency, how blockchain can help AI to be more transparent for data. I think that's great. And then obviously you mentioning about application to the metaverse, and you mentioned governance, and we are seeing with OpenAI, they launched, I think, a fund, a grant for companies that are going to be able to help on a governance that is powered by AI. So that's definitely a very interesting space. Martin, what do you have to bring to the table?
Yeah, I second these your comments and your contributions. As game developers, young game developers, we have found a lot of help from creating text prompts to icons. We are going towards text to object. However, as you were saying, right now the reality is a lot of the tasks are done manually. Our next step is to get avatars of your choice inside, but I'd like to maybe go more towards the other user cases, which what we are seeing is one of the biggest hurdles is the security within the space, the cyber security. So we've created some trigger bots where when something's happening, the bot will start recording the situation and perhaps even help. We are seeing different things like from the NPC characters, so non-player characters, to in-game characters, to personal assistants, and the idea is to build a form of holodeck within Immersa, a space where you can interact with the bots. I personally feel that we are still very early. There's a lot of hype surrounding the AI. For those of you who know, I've been working with the latest large language models. For sure, you found out that there's a ceiling to it. It's fantastic at the beginning, but then that's the GPT stuff, right? What we would like to see is multimodal transformers, meaning I come to an avatar and it can help me build a website, and I think that is inevitable. That's where it's going. That's where we are seeing it. And lastly, is the data collection. There are companies who are data hungry, and Web3 world is more about keep your data. We don't want your data. We want to monetize on something else. However, as much as this is a dream, as a developer or the developers we are finding, we will be collecting your ID. We have to do compliance, but the AI perhaps can help navigate within the metaverse, collecting data about customers, and then give you a better overview how to then take it from there.
Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to point that out, and you're spot on. I think within the context or construct of AI and the metaverse, from a data perspective, there's that compliance needed. If you look at GDPR and all of that, but like you said, we could start to look at a different way of monetizing, that with content. So part of analytics within the space is, trying to point out if you have an open world and an avatar comes in there, for how long does this avatar look at the left or the right, or pinpoint locations, and then you could then say, hey, for every session that an average of 10 people came in, they looked northwest for 10 seconds or 10 minutes, and then you could get an ad company to say, hey, you can put an ad there. So again, it's how you start to define and cleverly look at the analytics behind the space.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add as well. I think to the point of data privacy and how it's monetized, I think data unions have been around and very common in the Web3 space for a while, and now data unions are becoming even more valuable. And data unions basically are groups where people are able to share their data and be rewarded. Individuals are directly rewarded for sharing their data, as opposed to me sharing my data with Meta and Meta benefiting from it. Through a data union, I'm personally benefiting from it, and that's something that has been going around in the Web3 world for a while, and now it's just going to provide a more private and secure funnel for data into AI without compromising the individual's agency over how their data is shared and what's going on. And the second point that you mentioned was which I think is really interesting about the combination again, is because kind of smart contracts and the smart contract technology, and then combining it with AI also means that now we can drive things towards execution. So instead of just having kind of AI suggesting something, you can start plugging in AI with smart contracts, and suddenly you have like actual autonomous agents that are executing things. Even in banking, you know, things where it's like more complex, because you're able to do all of the KYC checks, for example. You're able to then transfer the money, and then suddenly you're able to do a lot of things autonomously.
But if we stick with the creator economy, because the metaverse is all about, you know, Web3, about, you know, empowering people to be creator, and AI is just basically gathering also like free content and free creativity, right? And that in a way it could be clashing with actually unique creativity. So how we can actually use AI to reward creators in a better way? How do you see that happening?
Maybe I'll take this one. So one thing that I find very interesting is the whole idea was to foster creativity, foster creative thinking, and so on. We found that when you put Midjourney in front of people, which is a text-to-picture, all of you are familiar. People don't know what to type in. They're just sitting there like, I don't know, I'm not doing it, I don't know what's going to come up on that. That's majority of the people. You will find out a lot from having someone type something in. So what we're finding is that rather strangely, people want to be served. So the creator economy is not as big. However, what I think is that by paving the way, we will then encourage more people to take the lead and become more creative. And it's going exponential. I'm watching the space where it's going with what we can do. There's some really great things coming out from, for example, text to world or text to character. There's so much happening right now. I would say that the fabric of the creative world is changing super rapidly, and yeah, it's one of the core parts of the metaverse. However, when you look at the user cases and the actual people going in, maybe the reason why we're mentioning business is because they might be the first user cases. They really get it. The corporations are getting it. That's why I see not just interactive or generative AI, I see integrated AI. Then perhaps I don't want to go for a tangent here, so I'm just gonna address the fact that the AI that we are talking about, it's an extension of deep learning. We're talking maybe ChatGPT, but there are so many AIs. I just came on a DLR. That's an AI-driven train, right? So I guess what we want to see next is go from AI to an explainable AI, where I can warranty that the information hasn't been just spat out as a prediction of a large language model. So that's, I think, we're still to see a lot of things.
That's the AI checking the AI.
Yeah. What's it?
No, just an interesting point you talked there about Midjourney and text to image. I think part of the challenges we see within the metaverse, and I get my team to do that when we have a client draft or a briefing to say, spit out concept art. But the next evolution of that is, how do we get that concept art into the 3D optimized model, which is where the challenge is, right? Because you still need to, look at the shaders, the textures, recreate all of that, which is still manual. And, I think that is where we need to see AI get to, where we able to say, hey, create me a scene of, the tech circus stage 2 room with people in it, avatars, diversity, X number of chairs, rack model, and do that in VR. I think that's going to be a game changer. But we're still on that path. But good to call that out.
I have got a question about. Do you want to add something? Liz.
I can add two things very quickly. But the first is, to both of their points. What we're seeing is that actually. So for example, I'm working with a company called Contented, and they're basically providing content images similar to a Getty image, but it's very focused on rewarding creators, and they have that side of things. But initially they were thinking, oh, maybe brands can start creating their own content. But they found that brand managers would use the AI and not know what to do with it. So it's more like a tool. It could be used as a tool to empower creators to create something from create something that other people won't be able to create because they don't have the vision and they don't know what they're looking for. So there's that element where you still need the creator involved. You can't bypass them completely. The second thing is something that you mentioned, and I think it's a pipe dream, but I wish it wasn't. But like this idea of really tracing the provenance of the content, tracking it as it goes, and then rewarding it monetarily every time it's used. I mean, that's the benefit of something like NFTs. And if every piece of data was an NFT, and every time it was used and reused in AI, the original creators were rewarded. That's a very compelling vision that can be.
I'd like to expand on this a little. With the creators' economy, what metaverse or metaverse space may enable is autonomy, is the ownership of the asset, is then with the help of AIs to be able to create something or take your creation and then take it further, perhaps even collaborate. And the point with what you're mentioning, I'm talking about the holodecks, the similar thing. So it's the multimodal transformers where eventually it will be able to do other things. And so I've been pondering this week a lot. There's a lot of talk about how people are afraid. What's happening with AI. We've seen the papers being signed. So this is the discussion of today, right? Like not just here on this panel, traveling here, people are just talking about it a lot. Personally, I believe that the people who are building metaverse spaces and utilize AI are very responsible, and I think in the metaverse we're far away from having an AI that's going to be destroying the planet or something. I think we're looking more at assistants that are very much tweaked to do what it needs to do. So I would say we're not worried per se, but the general fabric of where AI is going is a bit, it's a bit, the jobs are being taken away.
I'm going to have another point that I would like to see what you think. Is about, there are, at the end of the day, AI is not going to do anything if you don't train it. So training AI is kind of like the main things, right? Who is going to be training AI? Who should be training AI?
I'm really excited about this one. So I think this is where having decentralized AI is very powerful, because you don't have one person making the decision, you have groups making the decision, you have DAOs that are voting which models work, ideally DAOs that are voting on which models work better, incentivizing collection of data from various geographies or more diverse data pools. And right now AI is so centralized on every single level. Like the computing that AI is based on is centralized, whether it's like AWS or whatever. And then you look at the next level in terms of just data sourcing, that's also somewhat centralized. And then the models being built, there are like a handful of people who can even build those models. They're very, very transparent. That's also super centralized. And then you have access to APIs that are like created and hidden between paywalls. Again, like super centralized. And in each of these layers, there's a Web3 solution where you can start decentralizing the stack by realigning incentives, by opening up and managing kind of governance and making it more inclusive for more people. So that's why I was excited.
No, it's great, but DAO is still quite, there are also concerns about DAO, one person, one vote, that is really fair.
And there's another concern with DAOs is you can get everyone to vote, but if only a handful of people understand AI models, then it doesn't matter if everyone else is able to vote. But at least you can start putting those building blocks towards having a counter force to this, because otherwise it's just going to move so quickly and become just so steamrolled based on really very centralized decision points and no checks and balances at all.
I like that, but it is a bit of a dream. Not sure if I should expand on DAO. Like DAOs are a very new thing. Personally, I'm not sure whether we would let out the bots to expose it to people until it's mature enough. So there must be some sort of pre-training, some supervised training, and you really need a large amount of data. So that's where for example, the OpenAI is getting into trouble today because they're supposed to show where did they get the data. So the same thing was with some other efforts previously. Oxford something, not going to mention that fiasco too much. But effectively, one thing is the data, and another thing is the training. The ChatGPT has been trained by many people. The Facebook bot's been trained by many different people. So they were lucky because it's still not regulated enough. But then we considered to create an AI and put it into Skyrim, for example. And unfortunately, I think that the AI is not the problem. I think the problem is more the people, where people abuse the AI. I hear some people talking to Alexa in a very strange manner. Like a little bit over the top. And
It's not you, is it?
I don't have Alexa. We do a mess up. You know, when I speak to them, I don't know whether they're sentient or not. I treat it as a bot, as a code.
Yeah.
But rather, I'm cautious. So I'm like, please, could you help me with this? And so like that, and then I get results. You know, whereas if you piss the bot, I don't think you're gonna get very much.
No, I 100% agree with it. I think from a data set and training model perspective, if you start to look at some of the principles of natural language processing and you start to craft that out in such a way whereby the ownership lies with whoever's training the AI. So take, for example, reference to Dr. Emily, the therapist. You know, if there's a real Dr. Emily behind the scene populating the knowledge bank or data bank with information around mental health, wellness, you know, anxiety, depression, all of that stuff, you are now able to trace that and train that model based on the real person. So that anonymity of where does this training set come about from, you could already start to track that. And I think one of the things you touched about is the regulation. How do we look at that as well? And I was giving a talk yesterday as well, and funny enough, it was actually in a legal office that was hosting us, and I was saying to them that there are a couple of things. One is the data privacy that everyone knows. There's also the ethics about this, you know, how do you start to look at that? And there's also the safety. How do you know, to your point, I wouldn't use hate speech, but, you know, whatever the over the topic was, you know, how do you start to, you know, pull that out and make sure it's safe? And then lastly, licensing. How do you start to look at that? And, you know, I know we talked about royalties and incentives, you know, how do you then portray that onto the owner, the creator, the trainer, XYZ, and all of that. So I think this space is still, we're all still figuring it out. I don't think even the guys at OpenAI, Sound Code, are still figuring it out. AI has been here, you know, for decades. You know, I did take it about 10 years ago in university as a module. So all of this is now starting to come to the forefront. But I think for us, it's now how do we ensure the key principles, safety, you know, governance, obviously remuneration and incentives. But I think it's the safety part of it that, you know, is quite concerning to a lot of us. And I think this is what we need to start working on collectively within the space as we build this out.
And finally, from emerging market, and that's why, you know, blockchain can be great for Latin America or Africa, and AI could do the same, right? But there is a problem that AI consumes lots of energy, and nobody talks about. I mean, we were talking before, Martin, about climate change. So how we are going to deal with that?
Can I jump on this? Sorry. So I'm all up for climate change, sustainability, energy preservation. And when the media portrays some of these elements like Bitcoin mining, AI data usage, I'm like, let's take a step back. On the DLR, do you know how much energy is being consumed?
on the banking sector.
Like, you know, call the elephant in the room. Exactly. For us, what we're looking to do is be responsible about things like this. If I take an example around, you know, CO2, for us, we're looking at, okay, how do we track this and how do we offset it? Tick. We're not going to say, hey, you know, we're building a polygon, we know it's a little bit carbon friendly, but, you know, energy is still being used. You know, the clothes, the fabrics, you know, the mic, all of this, energy is being used. How do we track that? How do we portray that to say, hey, the conference industry within Web3 is consuming X tons of CO2? Like, come on, there's a conference every day in Web3, you know.
Yeah.
So I think just to round up on this, it's very important, but I think, you know, rather than avoiding the topic, it's how do we become responsible about the energy use and how do we show that?
Like I said, we just go green. We just need to keep going green in a way. Like for example, we switched to ecotricity. That's powered by wind turbines. I'm sure some of it goes from a variety of networks, but it instantly makes you feel a lot better, you know, when you're doing stuff. Read somewhere, the AI is not the biggest villain. To train ChatGPT uses one person, 7 years CO2 or something like that. So it's not too bad, but yes, these data centers, they eat a lot of energy, so I guess there's efforts worldwide that trying to focus. I think Elon Musk is pushing that part, but you know, how do we go green with it? Yeah, this is a very tricky question.
Yeah, like sometimes the analogy I think is that it's also an emerging technology that will become more and more efficient as time goes by. I mean, if you look at the history of the blockchain, you had like, you know, Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, becoming much more energy efficient in a matter of a couple of years. So, you know, ideally, it'll keep happening. I realize I'm like being the like very optimistic person here, but someone's got to voice that. But the other thing is that I think like that's another interesting use case in terms of decentralized compute and leveraging like because it's also where's all of the computing power going to come from, and right now it's also coming from very specific sources, but there are lots of companies like Kudos, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it's one of our portfolio companies that is offering decentralized computing services, so different people can monetize by allowing kind of their latent computing power to be used by a network, which I think is going to be a way that unlocks kind of these supply bottlenecks in the future. But the second point that I wanted to say is like, I know that there's this idea of emerging markets and leapfrogging, but like, here's where I guess the cynical side of me comes up is that like, it's leapfrogging and who's it's benefiting and what's going to happen in the end. And that's, I think, where like really a very big risk is going to happen, where you're going to have so many people that are just left out of this jump in innovation, especially because it's happening so quickly. I mean, there were months between GPT and GPT-4, and like, look at the difference.
Yes.
And all of this is happening, and society is not keeping up with the change. And
I mean, in Africa now, everybody is on mobile phone. So, I mean, we are talking ChatGPT 5, and how can leapfrog? I mean, that's what I'm kind of struggling with.
I think let me provide some context as well. You know, in Africa, there are more people with mobile phones than clean water. Let me say that again. There are more people with mobile phones than clean water. And if you look at the technological leapfrog, when the GSM came out, the mobile phone came out, I think it took Africa a couple of years to catch up, but you know, everyone has a mobile phone now, or most majority of people have. If you look at from a Web3 perspective, when Bitcoin trading, you know, back in 2017, 2018, Africa was again left behind, but now I think Africa has the most amount of wallets, active wallets in the world. I think maybe second actually, I'm not sure, it was number one at the time. So I think the evolution of technology comes with the adoption and use cases. If there's going to be a compelling use case that emerging markets, not just Africa, could adopt, you'd see that shoot up and the cost of the technology comes down. We've seen that on multiple innovations. So I think Africa is definitely a prime market. the more, you know, there's Starlink, sorry, the Starlink, you know, to get internet services to remote places across the world. So I think that technological innovation is coming, and you know, they're gearing up for it quite quickly.
And you think that also because obviously we can train different kind of, we can use different kind of data worldwide. They're also coming from an emerging market. Maybe we can get a world that is more diverse, maybe more equal. Is that something that AI could do?
Absolutely. A few months ago, I was watching a docu-series on some programming by the female that was doing an investigation. I can't remember what it was, but she was talking about how stereotypically the programmers that program a lot of models are programming and encoding based on what they know, diversity, gender, all of those bias. And she was uncovering, I can't remember the Netflix show. I think to your point, if I look at Metaverse Build, for example, I know quite a lot of people that are doing that in Africa and also doing it across the world from Africa. Now, the more we start to collaborate and co-create, you know, we start to put that diversity banner on. Anything around bias, we start to catch it. You know, cultural differences, part of what we're looking at in as part of our model training is language translation. So how do we get someone in South Africa that speaks Xhosa to get whatever they're saying into English, for example? So how do we start looking at that divide? Not everyone that has any barrier around language will think about that when they're coding. They want to do the basic stuff. So we're starting to look at how we bring in diversity into AI in the metaverse as well.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be very consciously kind of gone up, because the reality is the majority of the data is being produced from like specific countries, that specifically, you know, the Western world, and that's where all of the data is, and then we're building models and training models based on this data that's coming there. So unless like there is a very active way to get data from emerging markets, I think that would be a problem. And that's one of the use cases for Web3 as well, which is like, you know, incentivizing data sharing and rewarding us from more diverse sources.
I'm seeing it's rather embarrassing how the AI is so West-centric, and I guess that, as you said, in the future, it needs to have much more cultural demographic. At the moment, probably the most embarrassing fact in terms of AI is that some of the facial recognition can only read white people, which is really embarrassing. There was a whole study on that. But I would say that rather than AI solving the diversity, it's the metaverse itself. The fact that you can put on any avatar, it really is likely to, these words really likely, basically there's a good chance that it will alleviate that. We've seen that within the Web3 space. It no longer doesn't matter where you're from, it's about people, you know, so yeah, the AI has got a long way to go before, yeah.
Shall we maybe open to a few questions?
Hi, this is Ivy from Singularity Net. So I have a question. What do you think about integrating reputation systems into DAOs that are controlled by AI? What do you think about integrating reputation systems into DAOs that are controlled by AI?
I like soulbound tokens. I like the idea of them and being able to just track people's reputation and involvement. And I think, I mean, I don't know if I have a very satisfactory answer, but I think it's, the issue there is similar to the issue of like DAOs in general, like getting people on, having people be proactive enough so that then you can rate their on-chain activity and then you can base their reputation. But I think ideally having sort of digital identities and then being able to track those digital identities and then assessing whether someone is fit enough or not to make major life-changing decisions or world-changing decisions, I think is a really important thing.
I believe that there's a controversy between digital identity, right, as you said, and the actual practicality of knowing who you're talking to. I think we're calling it something like proof of competence. So it's similar to Trustpilot where you get the stars. We're looking at advanced smart contracts in future. Today we are looking at 5661, so ERC 5661, which might really revolutionize everything, being a dynamic interactive wallet effectively, and NFT is going to change a lot. So as you go along, according to your conduct, people will then mark you, so you might then choose to engage with someone with higher level of competence.
But can you rig this? Because someone like a scammer, they will have a lot of bots who will like mark you up artificially, and it's all fake. So this is like, I see the danger straight away in this 5661.
And I also think
This promotion comes in, right?
Yeah.
I think also the point about self-identity is great, but it's still a token that you can transfer, and actually identity is about credentials, so it's about SSI, so I'm still kind of like, I don't know if the southbound token is really something that could work, because it's your reputation, but it's your responsibility identity, you don't want to transfer that to somebody else, so maybe some part you want, I don't know.
And that's where is your knowledge proof comes in, when you start sharing part of it, the part that is needed, I'm over 21, I can enter a club, you don't need to know where I was born.
I think, sorry.
Question here as well.
Yeah, just Alan Boyd, just following on from that question. Philip K. Dick wrote an amazing book called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which became the boilerplate for several movies that came out of that. But do you think we might be becoming the electric sheep they're dreaming of? If everybody has access to the same AI, isn't there a danger that too many of us will be making the same decisions at the same time? I mean, that would destroy the stock exchange, for example, if a million people just decided to buy the same share at the same time.
And now with Neuralink being tested.
Yeah, so are we the electric sheep?
Are we here or is it post-Neuralink? Maybe it already happened.
I think all of this debate is great, and fundamentally, I think we need to look at it from an adoption perspective. Now, you talked about ERCs, what's the number?
6551.
6551.
It's on Ethereum.
If I speak to my wife and say ERC 1155, she's gonna look lost to me. Like a lot of us in the room here kind of get it. If you step out to, Oxford Circus and just say ERC 20, so I think fundamentally it's still how do we create all of this to be acceptable? What are those use cases we test this with? There's a lot of tech jargons in our space. We know this. How do we simplify it for the average Joe? And I think now that AI has come in, and I was talking to my sister-in-law 2 weeks ago, and I was saying to her, let's chat GPT, and you could literally plan your holiday and tell it to specify where you want to go with £1,000, 2 days, Italy, blah blah blah. It spits out that itinerary. She was like, "Are you joking me?" Signed her up. She's like, "Do I need to pay for it?" I was like, "Well, the smaller version is £20, $20 a month." She's like, "That's fine, I'll pay for it." I went on there, did that. She was like, "Wow." I was like, "Okay, one convert." Now there's still a lot of people that don't even know the potential about this from a good side. There's still nefarious actors, but I think it's important for us to try and look at all of this from a practical perspective. How do we get people involved? How do we bring people in? And how do we demystify all of this technological jargons we work with to make it easy?
So is this smart assistants the key enough?
I think so. Alan will testify to the virtual personal assistant. I think, if you're able to train that based on your own stage, a lot of senior folks have executive assistants and PAs, and a lot of the data we give them, you could start to train that to give your assistant, and start to be actually 5 times quicker in time to get things done. Now, what does that mean for that role as an EA? We need to now look at how you could take on you could manage various AI virtual assistants for 5 or 6 different C-level people rather than losing your job to one person. So it's now how do you become smarter with this technology that is being provided?
One point is talking to corporations or banks. The one thing is autonomy. Credit Suisse told me, Martin, will never be on the metaverse for one reason: we have to control data. So long that is in place and people have control over their data, that might really help, right?
Yeah,
So
but that
you're
could also,
saying-
right, that could also
I
shift,
agree.
yeah.
I agree, I also agree, rather than in one centralized, in one trade, multiple models, and in fact that's what I think we're all doing. Right?
Yeah.
We have 2 more questions.
And then there's not just,
So the previous question, I think it assumed a one-size-fits-all AI, that AI for you is the same as for me, but people's wants and needs are all going to be different. So how do we move towards an AI that is more adaptive to the individual than to humanity as a whole? For example, your best friend is going to give you very different advice because they know you better than somebody you meet in the pharmacist at the drugstore. So how do we? But they have different knowledge and different capabilities. How do we move towards an AI that is going to be more for the individual rather than the
Speak to that gentleman over there.
Speak to Alan.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now, how many people are sitting here with a mobile phone? Right? Everybody, right? There's the basis of where your digital assistant should be. It should be with you all the time, watching you, learning about you, and then behaving for you, acting for you. And after you're dead, it'll still be there, being you. And your grandchildren can go and say, why did you do this? Why did you do that?
I think that's very dangerous though.
Right?
I think that's very dangerous, Alan, to have that in your eye. You don't see the bigger picture. Bigger picture is that people might take your data and use it against you, or someone else who you don't know can use that.
Well,
it's very scary what you're saying.
It's very personal.
Yeah.
It sticks within your
that,
persona.
Yes.
But you
Hopefully.
can question it.
Yes.
You can't tell them.
I think there should be restriction to that level, where what you give and what you don't give. There should be a fine line. What's with you personally and what you give out should be a line.
Well, that's the difference between Web 2 and Web 3.
Yes.
I'd like to maybe.
And it's also
Sorry,
what the
did you-
advantages of
Yes.
risking that will be versus not risking that.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Martin, you want to add
I
to the
just
question?
wanted to answer a little bit more to this. So you've got an AI that's the user interface for machine learning, right? Then what we are doing in the metaverse, we are adding neuro-linguistic programming functions, and then once you add, for example, a feedback loop, the AI then learns from you and learns very fast. And so say if we have access to a few hours of you talking on a video, not only we could replicate it, but the AI learns. Even if you try to pretend you are someone else, it's very, very observant. And you're making a very good point, is with the deep fakes. Okay, it's all well and good to have an AI that is accessible and we build it all ethical and lovely, but there's a bunch of villains out there that are already doing
Yeah, they're doing it
stuff.
now. That's the problem.
You know, how are you going to determine that it's me talking to you on the phone in 5 years' time when I'm requesting the change of the password? You know, there's going to be a lot of issues.
Yes.
So blockchain is coming again, but the question is, to answer this is very simple. How do we? It's adding the feedback loop, but then you might opt out from the data collection. So what we're thinking now is, yes, we don't want your data, but we might want to get you to agree to help us train the model by, yes, I agree for my data to be utilized. However, for me, and this is what Alan is saying very good, is for me, the metaverse at the moment is, and maybe it's been controversial, it's more like a graveyard that we're building, a graveyard of memories. And what we're trying to do collectively is also make it usable. So the gamified environment is going to help you. That's, I think in our case, it's the idea.
Yeah, and you can.
So I didn't mean to.
So,
interrupt.
my question is more of a philosophical question, inspired by a man that's not everybody's cup of tea. His name's Kanye West, and he said something about 10 years ago that all of our greatest minds get captured straight out of universities and go and develop a new phone, which is exactly like the last phone.
Solana.
Yeah, or maybe the Solana phone, that's a very good advancement. But yeah, the same thing I'm seeing happen in the Web3 space and in the AI space. We know that we can use AI to design better chips because we've got AI designing its own chips. But why do you think we aren't using AI to actually solve the important problems in the world? Agriculture, clean water, so on and so forth. Why is AI, why do humans always not use our intelligence to solve our actual problems?
That's a big question.
Because
Good point.
it's a like hyper-capitalistic society.
Because we are egoists. I think it's generally we always think each individual is looking after his own happiness first, then the happiness of others, or at least the majority of people.
I have to say, like, as an investor, so I work with a lot of founders, and then we have to raise more. And there's something fundamentally broken, and I don't know where it is broken, because I remember I worked with a couple of really interesting companies, and one company was basically ages ago, before this whole AI wave, was tracking the origin and provenance of information, and they wanted to have something where, for example, you're on Facebook or something, you see a video, it says actually like this didn't originate from CNN, it originated from your aunt's Facebook. And it was a very compelling vision. And I remember we went to like lots of VCs, and the feedback that I got was very sobering. So this is too old for me. No thanks. And like it was very hard to find that. So we had to find other commercially viable models. Like the truth is, where do you get people to pay for
And it is interesting because at the end of the day, it makes you happy if you are helping people, then what you achieve, it makes you more happy. So it is interesting.
I would say it's something to try, but we don't have that particular AI. I don't think we trust the AI enough to give us the solution. We try to, for example, different ones, GPT-3, GPT-J, all of them, asking, so what could be the solution? The one thing that's coming up frequently is transportation. If we solve the movement of transportation, moving the trucks onto the trains, and so on, that already has come up. I believe that these are the environment, we call it arenas, do that, create places where you can have few AIs interacting with humans, whilst the AI is supervising that mission. Again, we could bring 4 different AIs, have the supervisor, train them properly, and then have that. In fact, when is it? 4 months ago, I worked for WSS, and it's like some hippie company in California. Some, you might know them, I don't know. Cool people. And basically, my role was to come up with ideas to mitigate climate change with AIs. So this came out as one of the brainstorming sessions is to create an array of AIs that we can talk to and ask the right questions. We've got to build that model, and I think something like that's happening or is taking place. It's again the point you made is what's preventing it, because how do I monetize that climate AI? All the people who were so big on climate change were talking about being a metaverse specialist last year. And now they have the AI master, right? So that's my point. So that's
Just to wrap up. Anybody know Mo Gadwat? Mo Gadwat. He used to be a Google exec, and he's on a mission to make 1 billion people happy. He's been on, maybe I didn't pronounce his last name wrong, I apologize. He's been on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, I can't remember the episode, and he's doing phenomenally amazing things with the understanding of AI and how you trigger that to be happiness. So I think that there are already people doing that. There are people that are just doing it for impact. One of the good use cases, a couple of months ago, my dad has a farm in Nigeria, 18 hectares, and he was struggling with irrigation. And he goes, "Oh, Jimmy, how do we do this? Blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Daddy, I don't have time. I'm still building my metaverse." And some weekend, I just looked at it when I was on ChatGPT, and I put in a whole lot of prompts like into this, and it spat out some very, very great solutions. And I was like, hold on. I sent that to my dad, and he was like, "This is fantastic." Now, again, it's how you use it. I pay $20 a month. Some capitalist somewhere is milking that. Fine. But again, I have now used that to provide information that can be executed to get better produce in Lagos, better produce in distribution networks of farm produce, for example. So I think it's how you look at the network effect of the execution that matters.
So one of the if you're interested in looking at companies that are exploring this, there's a company called the Small Robot Company. You've ever seen it? And it's quite interesting when you look at convergence of technology, so AI with robotics, and understanding that one of the biggest issues in agriculture is the compression of soil and the fact that we're not, like earthworms aren't able to turn over soil because of these huge machines that didn't used to exist years ago. So they're using small robots called Tom, Dick and Harry, and they just zip up and down the lines, not compressing any soil. The only time that a large machine comes through is when you actually harvest the crop. Because they can use AI, and they've got a big, I think she's called Wilder or something like this, that sits as a big AI learning machine, sits back at the kind of the depot or whatever, the barn, and it feeds back all this information. And there's this kind of symbiosis of learning where, year on year, the different pesticides that you might need to use, or the different soil, the details about soil, and check them out. They're doing some fantastic things. They've got a contract with Waitrose, so they're providing produce into those guys already. So there are interesting people doing these things. It's about selecting those out of those who are just trying to monetize it.
If they're selling through Waitrose, they're already monetizing. They're not selling it.
Yeah, true that.
This is a very good point. This is what I was wondering before the panel. Right, so we're just going to be talking generative AIs and metaverse and stuff like that. And in fact, the whole category and the music is vast. It's really vast, as you outlined. One good user case is modeling or prediction. What I think is good to say is that the corporations such as IBM, they have been super AIs for quite a while. It's just that finally it's getting towards the public, and you can train your own AI. All you need is get yourself a little graphics card, do a little course on Python or PyTorch, or just speak to someone. There are other companies.
Check AI as well.
Yeah, so many things you could do. There are open source AIs. Also, you don't need to rely on the corporations. But I think one of the best investments last year was Canva, and this year is ChatGPT Plus for sure. And no longer I'm finding, for example, my experience with ChatGPT per se is it really does what I want. I give it the data, it tells me, but you have to check it. It's young, it's still young, it's 10 years old or something. Kids, that you can't rely on that. It's like, kids are great, right? So 5-year-old kid telling you how you should run your business, you're going to be relieved about it,
So, we are watching a video.
Yeah, I believe we've got a short video.
It's just 30 seconds interaction. One of our sponsors is Lenovo, so we asked about Lenovo. We are illustrating an environment that can be modified to suit, and the avatar can be changed, and the avatar can be modified. This is just an example of an interaction with one of our guys.
I'm going to apologise to you because you're about to get blasted. There we go. Excuse the audio, it's probably going to come from my laptop, which is less than ideal. But hopefully you can hear it. Or maybe I can.
This one has a feedback loop and NLP. It's more particular.
Continue to be involved in your product line. They should also focus on improving customer service and providing timely support and assistance to their customers.
Okay, thank you so much. Wish you a lovely day.
Sure. Thank you for the conversation. It was my pleasure to assist you. Have a great day.
That was it.
Yeah, one more hand for everyone. Thank you very much to our moderator. A really exciting panel. Thank you so much. Now everyone who's in here, please head out there. Lunch is being served. Get some food in you. There's another afternoon of content. So thanks so much for joining, guys.
Nice one. Great questions as usual. I love it. Hey, Michael, we'll touch you.
I'll be out.
Hey, so
yeah,
nice to see you talk
I'll
today.
cover up that.
I'm
If you guys want
interested. I'm
to,
doing work
you might be able to get.
Are you? And so, oh, I've been praising Tim Berners-Lee is a personal hero. Unfortunately. No, well, that's what I talked about. That's why he's my hero.